Hey everybody. It's Sunday night, so we are going to do a around the world update tonight. Not a lot going on, but we are just going to go around from tank to tank and talk about each one for a little bit. We'll have a little bit of a look at them. Of course, just a moment ago, the striated bodias, or the zebra loaches that I have in this tank, were very active and they were all out on the bottom. But despite having them in this tank for years, they are still very skittish, and when I walk in front of the tank or make any kind of sudden movements, they tend to dart and hide. And it's a shame because they're really pretty fish. I really ought to do more video of them. If I set my tripod up and set the camera up at a distance and walk away, I can usually get some decent footage of them. But they're really fun to watch, and they're really beautiful fish. I really do like loaches a lot. I have quite a few of them in this tank and my gourami tank. But other than that, nothing going on at all. I haven't made any changes to this tank. Haven't done any water changes. Same old, just ticking over like a clock. My gourami tank, I actually did just finish a water change about an hour ago. I did a little before and after video on it. Nothing special, just a little bit of water taken out. I did remove a lot of the plants. I took a lot of the floating water sprite out of the top. And then over here, I actually wound up removing a fair amount of the red tiger lotus, but more importantly, I went in the back around where the filter intake is, and I cut back a few of the temple plants and some of the tiger lotus that was growing up back there. I even got a little bit of java out of the back, and it was just sort of impeding the water flow around the filter intake and reducing the efficiency of how fast I can remove all of the various droppings and detritus that accumulate in this tank. So all in all, I do still keep a pretty good, nice clear bottom without having to worry about too much gravel vacuuming. I did save a lot of the plants that I pulled out of here. In fact, I saved all of them for the time being because, as I mentioned in the other video, I'm not 100% positive that I did not get a frog somewhere in all of the vegetation, and I didn't want to just chuck it in the trash can. So I did put it in a bucket of water, and I will go through it with a fine-tooth comb before I actually get rid of it. And then that way I'll make sure I don't actually lose one of my frogs. I did see the other one, or I did see one of them, I should say. Let me see if I can find him. There he is. Can't believe I spotted him. But that's one of the frogs right there, up against the base of that tree, or base of the wood right there. It's kind of not really focusing. So there's definitely one. If I find the other, I can then just throw the plants away because I'll know I'm safe, but until then I'm going to hang on to those plants just in case I did accidentally get one scooped up in there. Other than that, nothing going on in this tank, or at least nothing that I can think of. Oh, yes there is. I did see during my water change tonight, my clown loach was down here rustling around, and he scared out that little South American bumblebee catfish that I have. So he is still in there. He is still alive. I saw him so briefly that even if I had my camera in my hand at the moment, we would not have gotten him on film. I couldn't have put the camera on him fast enough. He just made an appearance and was gone. But I did see him, so he is still in there. One of these days, I promise, we'll get to see him. The angelfish tank, I did actually just pull a fish out of here. I removed one of the angels and I put it into the 20 open top. And I know I said I did that last week, but I've actually added another one. So now I've got two angels and the rainbow fish in that tank, and we'll get to that in a minute. As far as this tank goes, I haven't done anything else. I simply removed that one fish. So now I have three angels. This one here is my German blue, and he is a gorgeous fish. And I also have my albino red eye, and then this one is just a mixed veil I got from a big chain pet store for a few dollars on sale a couple years ago, and looks beautiful. And I really thought about pulling this one out and putting it in the other tank. I think those long fins, I'm assuming there's some veil tail genetics in there. I think they'd look great in that other tank, but the fish I did remove from this tank was the one that was getting bullied and picked on, and the one with the long fins back there that we're not getting too good of a look at. There it is. This one never seems to get bothered by anybody in this tank, so there was no real reason to pull this one out. The other one got picked on by everybody in this tank, so I did see a reason to remove it. There's a little look at my dwarf green pike cichlid. This is a really cool fish too. It's hard to get a sense of scale. I know he looks like a, pike cichlid, but he is probably about the size of my pinky or smaller. Not a very big fish at all at the moment, and will only top out at about 4 inches. Honestly, hasn't really grown much in quite a while in the tank, and just seems to be sort of filling out around the belly. So I think we're getting probably mostly grown. It'll continue to get a little bigger as time goes on, but for the most part, I think that's about what we're looking at as far as full size for this one. So moving on to the T-bar tank. Surprise, nothing going on in this tank either. I haven't done anything at all. No water changes, no fish removal, no changes at all. I did use this tank recently in a video when I talked about surface agitation. Of course, I really looked at pretty much all my tanks in that video, but I did go into a little bit of a discussion about how the plants in here subdue the water that does flow on the surface. I have a hang on the back that moves quite a bit of water across the surface, but the plants tend to slow it down. Other than that, nothing at all going on in this tank. I do see my black ghost knifefish that hides in this cave here fairly regularly now. Doesn't really come out and move around the tank, but when I do my evening feeding and I put the algae wafers or shrimp pellets in there on the bottom, it will come out enough that I get to see it to my satisfaction. I don't mind seeing fish infrequently. I don't mind having fairly reclusive fish. As long as I get to see them occasionally. I'm a little disappointed with how infrequently I see that South American bumblebee, but there's not a lot of bioload involved with that tiny little fish, so it doesn't really cost me anything. The black ghost in here is quite a large fish, and it would be really a shame to have a fish that size that you simply never saw. So moving on to the 20 long open top. There you can see my angels. This is the one that I just put in. And I know the glare is getting on the camera again, but that is the one there that I just put in, and everybody's still real skittish. I had a little bit of a scare when I first put them in. The rainbow fish must have darted and dashed. You can actually still see, not on this side, but when he turns, if you look at his forehead right above his eye, you can see sort of a mark. And I think he bashed into something because he was swimming around all funny and up in the corner, and I really thought he was dead or dying. So I waited and I watched, and he sort of came around and started swimming again reluctantly, and then got back to swimming normally. So I think with the addition of the other fish, a little bit of fighting was going on, a little bit of reestablishing the pecking order, and in that process, that rainbow fish must have gotten spooked. And I have seen many a fish dash themselves to their own death against a rock or against the glass of a tank. In fact, I used to have a dozen rainbow fish, and all of them jumped so violently they bashed themselves to death on the hood. So that's why I'm down to one rainbow fish. He was not a jumper, never bothered to jump in the other tank, so he wound up in this open top. And that is how I have a rainbow fish in an open top tank. I've had this fish in an open top tank for well over a year now, probably closer to 2 years. And that's probably pretty remarkable for a rainbow fish to stay in an open top tank that long. But other than that, nothing's really going on in here. I'm still just kind of enjoying this tank. I really do like it now that I've gotten a lot of the algae under control in here. It really was overgrown for a while. But otherwise, nothing going on. The brackish tank. Boy, it's got lots going on in the brackish tank. We are treating for the red slime cyanobacteria again, and this time I'm not skimping on the air, as you can see. I did treat before. I did get a pretty good effect. I lost a bumblebee goby though, and I didn't get a full kill of the cyanobacteria, and I believe it was because I underestimated how much oxygen would be needed by the whatever you put in it. The additive you put in there works by a biological process, and it uses a lot of oxygen. So you need a lot of water turnover, and you need a lot of water circulation to keep the water well oxygenated. And I have the 2 filters on there, and I let them run full blast, and I thought that would be enough. But based on the results I got, I actually don't think it was enough. And so we're going to do it again, and we're trying it this time with the air stone. And instead of just putting a simple stone, I put in a bar that I had to really move a lot of water. I will say that before I did that, I pulled a few of the rocks out and scrubbed them manually. I did a water change and I vacuumed as much of the gunk out as I could. I got in there and scrubbed with a little toothbrush. In fact, you can see the toothbrush sitting right there. You know, I did my best to get as much of it out manually as I could. I was lifting sheets of it up off the rock, and bubbles were coming up from underneath of it. It's really nasty. Again, it stinks. It smells really bad if you've ever been around a high concentration of cyanobacteria. Really unpleasant. And it's getting so bad that like the room can this whole room smells like that cyanobacteria when you walk in. It smells like a musty basement now. And that's just it's nasty. So I'm really working on getting this tank cleaned up. I'm still on the fence about just breaking it down altogether and starting over. I really don't want to, but we'll see. You know, that's all part of the hobby for me. It's all part of the challenge. We'll try it this way and see if I can do it. If it proves too challenging, or it just gets to be where, you know, screw it, let's just start over, I will. I don't mind throwing in the towel from time to time. I've done it plenty of times in the past, but I just want to see if I can do this and get this under control, because I really have let this tank get bad with the cyanobacteria. The water's clean, the fish are healthy, all that's fine. It's just that nasty cyanobacteria just grows in there looking foul. And you've probably been able to notice now that poor little butterbean here is just pacing that glass. He's not a happy fishy. You can see he's got a lot going on in his tank right now that he's not used to and doesn't really know what's happening, so you know, he's pacing the glass a little bit. But otherwise, he's fairly happy. His belly looks nice and white. His belly looks whiter now than it did when I had that rainbow fish in here. So even with all this stuff going on in the water change tonight, he still looks healthier and less stressed than he did when I have that boisterous rainbow fish in here. So he's still doing well. He did eat 5 snails after the water change, so he's still a little piggy and is not, you know, losing his appetite or anything like that, so I'm not worried about him. He's just a little bothered by all the busyness and activity in the tank right now, so we'll get this cleaned up in a few days and we'll keep working on it. My quarantine tank down here is pretty much done. I can take the stuff out of here whenever I feel like it. I just haven't got around to it. I really don't know what I'm going to do with them. The 10 neons that are in there, I think I'm going to put in my 29 miscellaneous. I'm down to like 2 or 3 neons in that tank, so I might just spruce it back up by throwing some more in there. And then I have 3 more of those dwarf frogs in there. I tried one in the T-bar tank, and I noticed the black ghost knifefish darted out and attempted to eat one. I grabbed it by the leg one time, so I took it out. I have 2 in my open top 20 long right there, and I think I might add 1 or maybe even 2 more. And then I don't know what I'm going to do with the other 1 or 2, so we'll see where they wind up. I'm considering my 125, but I think my Tenopoma would make a snack of a little frog like that, so probably not the best of ideas. My snail tank here is still a snail tank. It's been doing pretty well as far as getting the population really going. I can go in there and just pick out snails at will now, which is what I wanted. So snails have become Butterbean's staple diet, and he's actually getting spoiled now, and he kind of turns his little nose up at the dried krill that I used to feed him as a staple, and now he kind of wants the snails as a staple. So we'll see how that goes, but I know it's good for him, and I know he's happy with them. You might be able to tell that I removed the pothos plant that was in here and that was absolutely covered in brown diatom algae. So that's gone. That's in the bucket in the other room. That's got the vegetation from the gourami tank in it. That's all in there together because it is still good living pothos plant. It's just got that algae all over it. I'm actually going to replant it in a planter and hang it out in the garden, and all that algae will die off of there, and I'll have a new plant growing that I can just make more cuttings and stick them back in other tanks. Plus I still have the original plant that I took those cuttings from hanging out in the garden too. So I've got all the pothos plant I could possibly want. So there's no sweat removing the stuff that I already took out of here. And again, sorry for the glare on this. You guys probably know how it is by now when I do these round the worlds. I just pick up the camera and walk around, so I'm not really turning lights off or blocking anything to prevent any glare. Excuse me. And I'm not really talking about what's going on in this tank because there really isn't anything going on. I'm just trying to give you a look at the gudgeons here because they're really cool little fish. They're not even that little, to tell you the truth. They spawn for me all the time, so I'm not too worried about it. I will get around to doing something with trying to get them successful. I've got some slate that I'm going to put in there, and I'm going to lean it up against the glass. And hopefully, instead of spawning on the glass, they will spawn against the slate. and then I can simply remove the slate and then put it in my quarantine tank, and then use my quarantine tank as a hatchery and a nursery until they start growing out. Now, one of my friends has told me that as he bred these, the babies basically will eat the smaller ones as some grow bigger. So as they do start growing, if I ever get this far, I'll have to have other tanks prepared and start separating out the larger ones as they grow. Otherwise, they'll start separating out the smaller ones if they stay in the tank. And I'll really be working against myself by keeping them all in a tight, all in a 10-gallon tank. That won't work at all. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. Another challenge, new aspect of the hobby I've never done before. The only thing I've ever really bred deliberately was my crebensis, and if you've ever had crebensis, you know that breeding them deliberately is about as laughable as saying breeding guppies deliberately. All you got to do is have a male and a female together, and you'll have babies. So besides some live bears, just accidentally having babies, and then of course the crebensis, I've never really bred fish, never really been interested in it. So if I do anything with these, it'll be interesting. Again, I'm not really ready to jump right into that just yet, but we'll see how that goes down the road. And I apologize, I haven't shot a lot of video on this tank. Again, I'm still kind of just in stasis on this one. I don't really know what it's going to be. I'm still considering putting that Madagascan rainbow fish in this tank. With these two gudgeons. I just don't know how it would go. I think these two gudgeons are going to get pretty aggressive with any other fish that goes in this tank. So I'm still sort of just sitting and waiting and watching. And honestly, this tank still hasn't balanced itself out. I'm still getting the diatom algae growing. It's still a fairly new tank. It does take, quite a while after you've achieved your nitrogen cycle and it's safe to put fish in there. You're not done as far as your tank actually finishing balancing out. And this tank's getting there. It's getting close. You can actually see now where I'm getting nice bright new growth coming out on the plants. So the plants are beginning to establish. I was able to get in there and manually remove and wipe away some of the diatom algae on the micro swords. So hopefully they'll start getting more light and they'll start growing in better. That's some pennywort in the back. Again, I'm hoping it can do something. That big splash over there we just heard was from my gourami tank. Somebody was having some fun or something. I think there might have been a bug on the surface of the water and somebody has got a little snack. So at any rate, this tank is still kind of just hanging on, and we're just sort of sitting and waiting and watching and enjoying these gudgeons because they really are neat fish, and I'm not in any hurry to do anything with them. I do enjoy sitting here watching them just sort of swim around and do their thing, and they beg like puppy dogs. As you can see, they're not camera shy or anything else. So one of these days I'll get around to doing some feeding video of these, or I'll do something a little more specific because they are really, really neat fish. So moving on, we are going to look finally at my 125, or my African tank, if you want to call it that still, because I kind of tend to think of it. It's all basically the inhabitants of my former African tank have simply been moved over here. If you're one of my longtime viewers, you'll know that my T-bar tank used to be my African tank. I simply removed the community, put them in here, and then put a new community in the African tank. I didn't change the decor or anything. So effectively my T-bar tank really still is my African tank. And if you look at my playlist and you see the African tank playlist, you'll actually see all these fish in that tank. So if you're scratching your head about what that's all about, that's what that's all about. These guys got bigger than I was expecting, faster than I was expecting. So instead of moving them up to a slightly larger tank, I went from a 40 to a 125, and I'm really happy I did because this is a really, really awesome tank. My Tenopoma there is just thick as a brick. He's a really, really cool fish, and he's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick in the middle. So if you see these guys in your big chain pet store and they're sold for a few dollars and they're the size of a postage stamp, they get pretty beefy. You're not going to be able to keep one of those successfully in a 20 long or 30 gallon tank. Again, I wouldn't really want to keep one of them in a 40 unless it was in there by itself, and even then I would think that would be a little bit cramped for a fish the size of that Tenopoma. That of course is my Synodontis eupteris, or African featherfin squeaker. Another one you can get at your big chain pet store fairly commonly. Not necessarily inexpensively though. I think these go for like 20 bucks at your big chain, or at least the big chains around here. Congo tetras in there, spawning, displaying, the males showing off for each other. I've stopped talking about that because it's basically just a continual thing. The physical spawning, the depositing of the eggs doesn't necessarily happen all day, every day. But it happens frequently enough that it's not even worth really noting anymore. The display behavior that we're seeing now, the males that are flashing and darting and dancing alongside each other, that's pretty much continuous. I normally think about tetras as being sort of what I call a wallpaper fish, and they're just sort of in there to be some sort of, interest moving around the tank. But then you've got your key fish, your feature fish that you really, focus on and watch. And I have to say, out of all the fish I have, I probably spend as much time watching my Congo tetras as I do any other fish in all my tanks, because they're absolutely beautiful. They're really fun to watch. Their behavior is interesting, and it just doesn't stop. It's just, it's not that frantic movement you get from Danios, but it's just a lot of fluid motion in the tank continually, and it prevents the tank from being boring. So I always recommend Congo tetras if you've got the room for them, because again, they are a slightly larger fish and they do need a lot of dashing and darting and swimming room. So I wouldn't put Congos in anything with less than a 4-foot footprint, 55 gallon or maybe a 40 long. If they make such a tank, something like that would be okay for Congo tetras. So that's about it. Again, nothing going on in here at all. Just wanted to give you a little look at the tank for a few minutes since we got to look at all the other tanks. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up. As usual, we are back to where we started here at the 29 miscellaneous. Anybody that might have been out on the bottom probably has dashed and darted away. So I'll thank you for watching this one. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and do so. I do a lot of video on all these different tanks and lots of different topics and subjects. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's a little more complicated. But you never know what you're going to get from me, so if you're subscribed, you won't miss any of it. So thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.